This is professional Darwinism, and those that adapt and adapt effectively will win. They'll be more profitable. And the ones that don't are dinosaurs because they're stagnant, they're stale. There's no way they're going to be as profitable or as generating as much revenue as a firm that is dipping their toes into AI now.
Valerie, to understand how you think about AI in real estate today, what helped you see where this industry wastes time or moves too slowly?
Well, I can really start from growing up. So I grew up in a real estate family, in a real estate household. And what common conversations over the dinner table were strategies as to what's going to be developed in this neighborhood, what tenant would work really well there, financing, and understanding loan structures, which was exciting over salad and mashed potatoes. And then I ended up going into the design architecture side of the industry. And I really learned, I remember the moment of sitting in studio late one night, finishing Spotify's first North American headquarters and realizing that what we were doing was very tedious and mundane. It was taking up a lot of time. And actually, if you fast forward 15 years, I was sitting in another firm and realized that they are still doing quite a bit of tedious, mundane tasks and thought, oh man, we've got to fix this. So it happened over a lifetime, really, understanding that this industry, though I love it, we all love it, we know that we are traditional and slow moving, and there's lots of opportunity to optimize.
So when did you realize those delays weren't just frustrating? They were actually expensive for developers?
Really, when I was practicing as a commercial designer, we have all been waiting for architecture drawings. I mean, since the Stone Ages, everybody's waited for architecture drawings. And we know that when you feel the pressure when you're in the studio trying to complete the drawings as quickly as possible, unfortunately, the sub-market has really commoditized their work. And so as adjacent industries are trying to get projects done faster and faster and faster, like let's make money sooner, the architecture designers and engineers are really they're working later nights and longer weekends trying to fit the same amount of work in less time. So you feel the pressure when you're on the inside of that bottleneck.
So for someone who doesn't know technical terms like BIM or Revit, can you explain in simple words what Thizo does from start to finish, your company?
So for your audience, for developers, what we do is we take your approved site plan or test fit in PDF form, Autodesk form, and we can model it in 3D, what your output is going to be, what that building is going to look like, that space is going to look like, based on past projects. And we can do it also to the level of finish that you have. So if you're doing a 5-star hotel or a 7-star hotel as now exists versus if you're doing a whole bunch of low-income housing, right? So we can model it according to and put all the materials into that digital model. And then we can create the whole construction documentation, a pricing set based on that model. And then we can also actually apply pricing and give you a budget. So we have a human QA system for this. After we create all of this digitally, the model, the CD set, the budget, we have a human on the team that reviews everything and then sends it to you. But ultimately, today you can get an AutoCAD, Auto Revit model, and then your budget in 24 hours.
Wow, that's quick. So when you say it does quickly, like that fast, so what decisions can a developer make sooner because of that speed?
Ultimately, developers, like time is money for everybody in this industry. And so I think it's important for developers to have good understanding of budget and pricing beforehand. And not only is this solid budget and pricing much faster, which could potentially take weeks or months to get back from general contractors. Now you can get a very, very solid rough draft budget that's malleable. So you can put in higher quantities or a higher multiplier for tax for instance. And not only does it show you live numbers as what reflects, what your brand and your projects typically look like onto your newest site project, or within a building project renovation. It also gives a really strong rough draft to your consultant. So you can then send it to the GCs and they already have something that's complete and they're editing and checking it and refining it, which they could do very quickly rather than trying to originate the numbers one by one, piece by piece. And you have a model that you can then send to the winning architect and design firm, and they have a big foundation as well that they can then refine and adjust accordingly. So you're saving a ton of time. And then also, it's just great for reputation in general. It's good to have those kinds of assets in the beginning, make decisions quicker, and also to have those kinds of assets to
Something
communicate with your consultants.
that's amazing. I mean, that's which saves time and like give you so much speed to do things. But still, when people in real estate hear about AI, what do you think, according to you, why they usually fear the most?
Great question. They fear lack of control and they fear job loss. They fear a little bit about data security as well. So we address all of those. So far, nobody has lost their jobs according to us. We have proprietary onboarding system in order to prevent that from happening. But ultimately, it elevates everybody's experience. 30 years ago, when computers and the internet were starting, computers and the internet helped us communicate faster, research quicker. A lot of jobs, frankly, were created because of computers and the internet. And we started doing more work faster. There's, of course, the old joke as to computers were going to allow us to have a 4-day work week. In fact, we all ended up with a lot more work. AI is very similar in the sense that if you're able to get your marketing materials like that, rather than hand it to the marketing team and it takes them a few weeks or a few months to complete it, they're going to end up doing a lot more marketing and a lot more targeted marketing, more effective marketing because of AI tools. And that's one example of how AI actually works. But to answer your question, jobs are not going to be lost in mass as long as we take responsibility and we understand it's an opportunity to implement AI responsibly. And then another fear is the loss of control. But we need to remind ourselves that we are the ones that are in control, that are captaining the ship, and that if you're the one that's purchasing the computers, if you're the one that's purchasing the social media ads, if you're the one that's purchasing the AI platforms, you are in control. You can also take that away. And so we need to understand that it's an opportunity. And as long as you're ahead of it and you're well informed and you ask right questions with your AI vendor partners, you are still in control. Absolutely. And then last but not least, the data management, the security. We can get into a little bit more into that. It really depends on the platform as to what questions to ask and what assurances to have at this point. There's AI platforms, healthy AI platforms are addressing this head on. And also founders who come from the industry empathize and they also don't want to have your data end up in adversary hands. So that's important to understand as well.
Great. So, if AI handles repetitive documentation and modeling work, what becomes the real competitive advantage for firms?
Creative problem solving. Ultimately, AI, the way Thizo uses it, is going
Mhm.
to, and it does already, underscore firms' brand. So, for instance, if you are a really education forward firm, there's an example of this. There's a small firm in the Mid Atlantic that uses us, and they pride themselves on making sure their greenest employees, their young employees, have all their licensing credentials. And what they have done is they can guarantee that if you have 3 years or less experience in the industry, on Fridays, they work from home. But on Thursdays, if you're in that group, you are being educated on technical details. You are studying for your AREs or your NCIDQ. You are on site. You are actively learning. That is mentorship day. And what they're finding is that they're getting the best students, the best talent is applying because they're giving back to that talent. The talent understands how valuable that is. They're also seeing that that talent becomes more valuable sooner in their career because instead of picking up red lines for the next 3 or 4 days, they're picking up red lines having used AI, they're picking up red lines for half a day, and then they can move on to the more complicated details and then learn even more complicated details correctly. And so they're getting a lot more done a lot faster in their career. And then on top of that, they're betting on, and so far it's working, retaining that talent. Because if you're able to do higher level, higher quality work, more creative problem solving sooner in your career, you're much less likely to have burnout, much less likely to jump for a higher paycheck somewhere else. You also want to give back and continue to learn and to grow in your career. So they're recruiting faster, their talent's valuable sooner, and they're retaining talent because of AI.
Great. I mean, still, AI is doing that much for the firms and for the teams, but we still see there's a resistance when we talk about AI. So where do you see the resistance most come from? Like from the leadership or from the teams?
It's really a matter of personality. Sometimes they're across industries, whether it's AI or trying a new kind of avocado. It's really, there's the early adapters, and then there's the bulk of everybody, and then there's kind of the weights, the stragglers. And so the early adapters tend to like change and they lean into it and they adapt quickly. And so whether it's leadership, sometimes leadership is leadership because they will jump into change faster than their peers, right? And if you jump into change, you learn faster. You're going to get, in the 90s, you're going to have computers sooner and internet sooner and a website sooner, a digital billboard sooner. You're going to have social media sooner. You're going to adapt to the next thing faster and therefore become more profitable, right? It is Darwinism in its professional form. So it's not necessarily a matter of, the leaders are against it or the leaders are for it and the youngest professionals are against it as much as it's more a personality. There are the early adapters at every level of the firms.
Great. But you have said firms should not rely on AI 100%. What must always be reviewed by a human before moving forward?
Most of us, and I think your audience would agree, have used ChatGPT or Gemini to write an email at this point, and would also agree that when you read through sometimes there's still a grammar issue or a misinterpretation of a specific vocabulary, specific word or two, or it's too general and it needs to be more specific, address specific ideas. So there still needs to be a human review of that. And we're talking about huge generalist AI platforms that have hundreds or thousands of people working on it for years and years and years. And we still need human review. And so any AI tool right now in the next few years, you're not going to want 100% perfect output. You're always going to have, you're going to want 99%, right? So that you have human review and check it over and comprehension and refinement, no matter what kind of platform. If it's renderings, if it's code review, if it is researching for the next sites to invest in, everything, every tool.
Great. So are there specific project types like highly custom or one-off buildings where AI simply isn't the right tool?
I think it depends on the AI tool. For Thizo, we work for education, multifamily, mixed use, healthcare, office, solution, retail, apps and sciences, data, industrial, basically anything, especially in commercial real estate. For us, there are very specific projects that are under 5,000 square feet that are custom residential homes. I would advise not to use us, but about 99.9% of projects, especially the projects your audience is working on, um, like we're a good fit for, I would say when you're researching and looking for the next tools, confirm that with them. Ask the sales rep or the founders or whoever you're speaking with, what's your ideal project and what's your least ideal project? And so they can advise whether you fit in that realm easily or not so easily.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was kind of about to ask. Like, if a developer wants to try AI without taking any major risk, what would a smart pilot project look like?
I think it depends on the platform. There's a lot of tools these days that give a 7-day free trial. Higher level way to think about this is really figure out who the founders are. And I say that as a founder, and it's because every day I am asked ethical questions and questions about the product. And my motivation is different than a founder who is building in a space where they didn't personally feel the pain point. So if you can look up the founders and see that, oh, he was a broker and now he's building on the finance side of AI, that's not a good fit. He's probably found surrounded himself with advisors that have felt the pain point, but his motivation isn't as innate. And it also makes it a lot harder for them to build product because they need your feedback from the client perspective in order to change anything. Whereas a founder that is building their own pain point, if they have had this position that your team has, they're solving for that, they're motivated to make an excellent product for you, for their colleagues, for their friends, for their network, not necessarily just to sell a company to a PE firm and then move on. So I think it's important to understand, okay, where are they coming from? Are they making a quick buck, or are they truly trying to solve our problems and want to hear what we have to say in order to make the product better over the long term?
Great. So, for our listeners, developers and investors, how much time does onboarding actually require from a firm's team?
For these, it could require less than a day. There's zero training involved for Thizo. It really depends on the developer's wants and needs and their portfolio. So if they've never built a hotel before and they want to use us, that's a little bit different conversation than if this is their 48th hotel that they've built. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's more actual time for them as much as it might be more engineering for us. And so it's important to understand, that's a great question, the iterations of platforms and how custom are they to solving our problems. Um, and and it might take a little bit longer onboarding time, but no time for the team, just more engineering time for the AI platform.
Perfect. Thank you. So, what is the most common mistake real estate developers make when on introducing AI into their workflow?
There's a lot of muck in the market. And I think there's a lot of hearing someone's friend's cousin's friend's brother and he or she speak about the product very highly. They're in sales, they're great at sales, they have great charisma, and we'll test it out. And then it doesn't work perfectly or as what you thought it would work. And so then there's hesitation of trying the next product. And ultimately, the early adapters, the people that are dipping their toes into AI, into the pain points in their own team's lives. So maybe that's they don't want to analyze the finances. Maybe they can get an AI tool that does that. Maybe they don't like making the social media. Maybe they can get an AI tool for doing that. Maybe they don't like doing pricing sets, construction document sets, and that's really painful and a lot of time for their team. Then look for Thizo products that can do that. And so we need to look at where the actual pain points are and also keep on trying different platforms until we get a really good match. Because again, there's a lot of muck in the market. And just because one platform didn't work doesn't mean the next platform won't work better. And that's exhausting, I hear. The healthy AI companies they are going to listen to that and they're going to keep on adapting. They want your feedback. They want to make it right for you, or they will be the first to admit we're not a good fit and here's a better solution. Um,
Perfect. So do you believe AI will reduce team size, or is it will just simply upgrade how teams work?
I think there's going to be a slow hiring for the next few years as everybody readapts to the implementation of AI, but it, it's not going to, we're not going to stop hiring people. What's interesting is really talking to recent graduates or undergraduates that are going to graduate soon, because there is going to be a lull in the market. And the best thing you can do is continue to build your network and continue to build your skills and what are the AIs to implement. Because what's going to happen is they're going to jump quite a few years of experience when they get into job positions. What I did for 5 or 10 years, they're not necessarily going to do because AI will do it. Long term, this is quite a blessing for everybody and quite an opportunity for everybody, including the recent graduates and the young professionals these days. In the short term, we're all trying to find our footing, and it's going to be a slower job market.
Great. So many real estate developers worry about data security. So what specific concerns do clients raise most often?
So, what I see are client concerns that aren't really what I would be concerned about. I would be concerned if the AI platform, again, the founding team, the headquarters are overseas. And if they are in anywhere really overseas, even if it's a friendly country, because you never know where that data is going to end up, right? They can sign all sorts of legal agreements, but unless you are Fortune 100, what are you going to do? Sue them? Like when they sell that data to somebody else, you don't know where that's actually going. And so I think it's important for us to understand where the headquarters are, where would the ramifications sit, if it is in within your national borders. And that goes for any company across the world. If you're sitting in Australia, if you're sitting in the UAE, if you're sitting anywhere, very much look into that because you never know where this could end up being. And again, the ramifications, you can lose control very quickly. And hopefully it doesn't come down to that. But that's the ultimate challenge, really.
Great. Well explained. So you have emphasized looking closely. I mean, you said it many times, looking closely at founder behind an AI company. Why does
Mhm.
that matter so much?
The founders' motivations are so critical. If they are from tech, but they're not from commercial real estate, or if they're from one part of commercial real estate, but not the part that you need the tech from, if they're from exactly the job that you need to optimize for, those are three very different perspectives. And they're going to bring three very different levels of empathy and to you and your team and the problem and the solution. And so it really matters when it comes down to frankly basic UI and UX, everything from if you've ever had a software or a platform and you think, this works about 60% of the time, you can almost guarantee you that the product manager and the founders, if it's a early enough, young enough company, did not sit in your chair at one point. They come from a different background. And there's also motivations for them to get some clients, raise a bunch of money in venture capital, get a couple more clients, but not necessarily improve the product, and then do that 2 or 3 times. Eventually, their company is high enough that they exit, right? And they're having bottle service in Ibiza, and you're stuck with a product that works about 60% of the time, right? And so it's really important to understand what their motivations are and if they're going to stick with you and if they empathize with your team and your problem and the right solution.
Perfect. So if a real estate developer is evaluating any AI tool, what are three key questions they should ask before signing a contract, apart from if it's not in your national territory?
Yes. So I would first and foremost look up the founder on LinkedIn or the founders on LinkedIn. See their history, like I mentioned, but also look at, are you connected to them by a couple people, or are you connected to them by 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 people? This industry, one of our biggest assets in this industry is not just the land and the actual assets, but it's also our relationships. And so use your relationships to make sure that this person has quality character. So I would ask questions around the founder. I would ask security questions. We've talked about that when it comes to, are they internationally based? If they are, again, what kind of relationships do we have with them and recommendations? If things got rough and you found out that they were selling your data to an adversary, how would you handle that? Hopefully, things will not get rough. We don't want that to happen at all, but I think it's important to think of worst case scenario when it comes to security. And then also, how does the company measure success? Are they measuring success by how many clients they're gaining or how much revenue they have? If it's a SaaS company, do they measure success by how happy their clients are, quality versus quantity? I would ask those questions to again understand their motivations, and if this is going to be a really good long-term clean partner, or if this is going to be kind of a quick sale and you're stuck with an AI that everybody's gotten used to but isn't necessarily working and motivated for different reasons and you'd like misalignment.
Right. So, what is the one red flag that tells you that the AI vendor who's trying to sell you something, or who is in touch with you, doesn't truly understand real estate?
So another really good way, other than looking at the founders' LinkedIn profiles, is to also look up who's invested in that company. You can very quickly see, Thizo, Crunchbase, and see what other companies that investment company has or angel groups have invested in. Is it a bunch of angels, like individual people? They probably know the founder. Sometimes you can tell how they know the founder. If it's a venture firm, do they invest in a lot of real estate companies? Are those companies that you've heard of and understand and have good reputations or already use? I think doing an extra half hour of research when it comes to understanding the investment portfolio is another great way to see whether they're red flags or not. And you'd be surprised as well. There's a lot of venture firms that are very, very well known, especially in prop tech, that actually don't necessarily invest in the most effective firms as well. And those are informal relationships built different ways, but not necessarily for the value of the customer. And so do your research when it comes to the founding team, of course, the product, and then also who's invested and backed this company. And that will tell you quite a bit.
Perfect. So, if AI compresses documentation timelines significantly, how does that change capital deployment or underwriting strategy for developers?
Well, I'll give an example from Thizo's perspective. So if you have 100,000 square foot space and you are doing the construction documentation, doing just the lighting plan, you have a dozen different kinds of lights and you need a light every 150 square feet. Doing the lighting plan alone could take up to 2 days without Thizo. And Thizo can do this in seconds. And so when you compress 2 or 3 months of a construction documentation set into a week or two, that shifts the entire schedule. You get to permit faster, you get to bid faster, you're paid sooner, you can do more projects, right? In that amount of timeline. And so it's a tectonic shift for everybody in commercial real estate when it comes to using Thizo. I think when we can look at that in a much smaller micro scale as well per team. What is working and what's not? And even in 15-minute increments, if something used to take 4 hours every other week and now it takes 15 minutes once a week, that's a phenomenal ROI. So I think we need to look at it from a time perspective, but also, is it ultimately making our team members happier and more productive? So maybe they really enjoyed analyzing the finances the slow way, but there's other ways to optimize their time and their talent. Then as leaders, again, we need to understand the responsibilities and the opportunities when it comes to implementing AI.
Perfect. So, in 5 years from now, what will separate real estate developers who use AI intelligently from those who simply have AI?
profitability, everything. I think this is professional Darwinism, and those that adapt and adapt effectively will win. They'll be more profitable. And the ones that don't are dinosaurs.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask. Like, what happens to firms that completely ignore over the next few years?
Yeah. Well, you can call them brontosauruses. If they're not adapting, then they're stagnant. They're stale. They're
Mm,
not gonna. There's no way they're gonna be as profitable or as generating as much revenue as a firm that is dipping their toes into AI now.
great, well said. So, if a developer, I mean, real estate developer listening today wants to start small this month, what is one workflow they should automate first?
So this is a very old school way, non AI way to do this. But what I would do is look at how you're spending your time every 15 minutes. And I would highlight everything you enjoy doing and the items that you don't enjoy doing. Can you optimize? Can AI support that? Can it quicken it? Can it do it completely or 99%? Right? And you can do this. Everybody in your team can do this. And so ultimately you learn where people's strengths are and where the opportunities are for AI.
Great. So, you have spoken about being underestimated early in your career. How has that shaped how you build and lead today?
Think people that are underestimated, whether it's because they don't look they're not extremely tall or they don't visually look like an extreme of any sort, or their resume doesn't reflect accolades that early in life people give out. I think they oftentimes have developed a lot of depth and character and resiliency that is hidden. And therefore, that's why they're underestimated. And what I found is that gives you a lot more empathy for people. You can read between the lines, there's a lot more intuition. You're used to working twice as hard to get half as far, which builds resiliency. And also, it allows you to observe challenges and solutions. And so you are a more creative um, problem solver. And it's also kind of a sneak attack. I think that the best teams tend to have low egos and they are used to being underestimated. They're used to working really hard and their output is much stronger and much more valuable for their clientele than the people that kind of life came easy to them and they were noticed for whatever talents that they have earlier in their life or in their career.
Wow, great. So, you mentioned building product market fit before raising large capital. What makes a lean tech company different from one that raises heavily before understanding its customer?
It's everything. I think if you understand the problem and understand the market really, really well, of course, you're going to be more strategic with your capital and your cash flow. You're also going to be more effective. You learn how to solve problems faster because you need to survive. And so you become a more effective leader and implementer. Ultimately, it's the underdogs. We all like to root for the underdogs. And I think the underdogs are the ones tend to understand their challenges, understand their strengths, understand their limitations a lot better than the people that have it's things have come easy to them, including cash, including capital. So ironically, sometimes it feels or it is it's the opposite. If somebody's already been given capital, it's easy to give them more, right? Somebody's already backed them, back them again. But that actually oftentimes produces companies and leadership that aren't as lean or clean with their finances. So look for those that are undercapitalized. Like the demographics is a blue ocean opportunity for any investor. Look for the demographics that would be much more grateful and much more strategic with your capital.
Perfect. So, you also mentioned that your turning point came when you first spoke publicly as a founder of Thizo and you saw a 40 million ARR pipeline built quickly. What did you say that resonated so quickly?
I think this goes back to understanding your client and really being able to empathize with them. So we got to market, and within a month had 40 million ARR in our pipeline, warmly in our pipeline. And it really goes back to being empathetic to your client and understanding the pain point and understanding the right solution. And you get to jump that whole period where a lot of tech companies, they'll spend months, if not years, and millions of dollars trying to figure out product market fit. If you already understand that, you can speak directly to that audience. You already hear them. You're already listening. You already understand them innately. And so it saves a lot of time and money for everybody. And that's really what the ticket was for us, is we understood who our audience was. We understood who our buyer was. We were able to speak specifically to those design and architecture directors. And then word got around and developers started approaching us as well. And we see the benefit with them, and with your audience, really, a few months later.
Perfect. Nicely done. So, one last question before we move to our rapid fire. You mentioned that women led companies often build leaner and generate more revenue per dollar invested. Why do you think that is?
There's a lot of studies on this, that from Harvard Business Review to the World Economic Forum, BCG a few years ago did a lot of studies on this. Men are wired as hunters. They tend to focus on something and do it really, really, really well. Classically, Jamal in the office can do that one job 100 times, and he gets the promotion, the trip, the carrot, the bonus by doing that really well. And that's literally how males are wired. Women are wired to uplift the entire community. So we tend to see all the details and understand, where your keys are, and when Olivia's ballet practices, and we can balance so many details so well because it's literally what we're wired to do. And so how the corporate world generally is structured, Katie does 100 things one time, but she doesn't get the carrot or the promotion, or the same as what Jamal did. That's just how corporate life is managed. So I think we oftentimes, with startups and in the tech world, will again give capital or give accolades to the persona that comes across as really focused and really confident, without realizing that fundamentally maybe the female founders aren't wired that way, but they're actually more effective with your capital. And it's because they are very good at reading people, hiring the right people. They're really good at listening to customers and clients. They understand product market fit oftentimes early on. Again, their motivation is to solve the problem and to solve it very effectively, and not necessarily just chase a $100 million exit or a $1 billion exit. And so also, women are taught to budget and men are taught to make money. That's pretty classic, and I think an international cultural truth. And so it is again a blue ocean opportunity for investors to look for women that are focused and that have innately, they are women and they are wired to uplift the community, but they are entrepreneurs as individuals, and they understand this is what I want to do. This is why. Here's my exit. And they might not present themselves necessarily as confident. They are confident, they just show it differently. And they oftentimes know a whole lot more about the customer and even the numbers than the man necessarily will present. It's just there's a lot more nuances and details that they know, and they're having a hard time communicating it as directly as a man necessarily would. So it's a phenomenal opportunity because right now women are getting about 2% of the funding, institutional funding, and we're 51% of adults. And so you can imagine all that opportunity that simply just doesn't have capital. Yeah, it's great that, I mean, I have mostly men on my team and they're fantastic and they understand that difference. And it's not a hard line. Everybody's a little, there's gray, of course, areas in there, but it's good to know if you lean into anybody's strengths, then you're going to have a better team and a more effective team, including if you are investing in an outside team.
Perfect. Great. So let's move to our last segment. That is rapid fire. So whatever comes to your mind, just say it. One mistake that taught you the most.
Listening is always a good lesson early on, especially for those of us that are extroverts. Luckily, I learned that a few times in my 20s. So, yeah, listen first.
Perfect. One decision that changed your career.
I have a lot of decisions that changed my career, but similar to the last question, listening to your gut and knowing who you are and understanding how you can contribute to real estate, to the outside world, knowing your strengths and limitations is key.
Perfect.
A few decisions that I made, different companies I've started or projects that I've been a part of and led or cities that I've moved to, some of the bigger decisions because I listened to my intuition.
So listening to others and listening to yourself as well. Great. Perfect. So what is more harder, building product or building trust?
Building trust.
Okay. One thing founders worry about, but they shouldn't.
Don't worry as much. Just action. Action beats worrying, overthinking. Action beats overthinking.
One thing real estate developers worry about, but they shouldn't.
Don't overthink. Action beats overthinking.
Okay. One skill AI is surprisingly good at.
It's getting better and better at renderings for the architecture design world. It's getting better and better at renderings.
Okay. One thing AI is surprisingly bad at.
Grammar. It still struggles with grammar sometimes. So human review helps.
Okay. Perfect. One habit that keeps you grounded.
Meditation.
One belief about real estate that is outdated.
Sorry, say that again.
One belief about real estate that is outdated.
I mean, to not use AI.
Okay.
Time. The date. The time is now. Use.
Perfect. If you could fix one thing in real estate forever, what would it be?
I think everybody should implement Thizo. That's a big question. It's a big answer. Implement Thizo.
I didn't see that coming. Okay, great. Finish this sentence. AI in real estate is
evolving.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Valerie. That was it. If our listeners, real estate developers or investors would want to reach out to you, where they can reach out?
They can find me on LinkedIn. Valerie Trent is my last name, Trent. Company's Thizo, THIZO.co. You can also email me at valerie.trent@thizo.co. And for your listeners on RealTalk, we'll give you a 25% discount. So mention the podcast and try us out.
Perfect. Thank you so much. This is Real Talk. See you next time.